Tonight on Cosmic Cantina, we're tackling the ever-creepy and insane world of reptilians. What do they want? Where do they come from? And how do I make them stop? Johnny Enoch weighs in with his ideas and an all-new interview, and we dissect a recent documentary as well as a classical tale of reptoid shenanigans. So grab a cigar and a glass of whiskey and join us for a few scaly encounters. I'm your host, Melissa Tittle, and every week I go to my favorite bar, Cosmic Cantina, and kick back with my co-hosts, Josh Golombeski and Matt O'Connor. We talk about aliens, Bigfoot, ghosts, ancient cultures, and anything from the unseen world that needs a little illumination. Welcome to Cosmic Cantina. I'm your host, Melissa Tittle, and tonight I'm back on the tequila train with a little bit of limeade. Classy.
Ooh. That's
Nice.
hydrating. Okay.
That is classy. I'm going more farm country style tonight. I'm drinking random red wine in a mason jar. It's my new style. I'm going to try to make it hot. Mason jars with wine. I love it. It's good.
We're back full circle, back to the red wine. All right.
I think there was a comment on a YouTube channel a while back. It was like, why is Josh drinking from a jar? There you go.
Really?
It's country. Yeah. I remember randomly saying that. Anyway.
Cheers,
Yeehaw!
internet stranger.
That's America. Look, I got some Orchard Crush from James Squire. Little cider action.
Okay.
And it's a little sweet, but, you know, I'm getting through it. It's the morning.
I like it. I like it a lot.
It's like a little apple juice for the morning for breakfast.
Like a little
There you
apple
go.
juice. Well, how about a little bit of lizards? We're going to talk about reptilians because everybody loves talking about reptilians. You know, is the
Love it.
government run by reptilians? Is your neighbor a reptilian? Did you have sex with a reptilian? We don't know. We don't know, but we always talk about it. And we're going to keep doing that. So I have some interesting stuff that I'm bringing up from an Oxford University neuroscientist. And what do you got, Josh?
Well, I watched a bunch of 4 documentaries over the last couple of weeks about aliens, and one of them was called Extraordinary, The Seeding, and it was really well done and really shocking and definitely involved reptilians, and I'm excited to share some of the nuggets I found in there.
Creepy. Yeah. I, on the other hand, tried to dig into the past a little bit, as I am wont to do of every now and then, and I tried to find a really early reptilian report, and I found this one. It was really bizarre, and it was from Italy back in '78, and it's a really long, crazy story, and I can't wait to go through it all.
Nice.
Woo! All right, let's get started. So, I found an article titled, "Like QAnon's Capitol rioters, the Nashville bombers' lizard people theory is deadly serious." It's from the Think section of NBC News. This is January 12th, 2021. You might have read about this in the news. This is their take. Federal investigators are still looking into the belief system of Anthony Quinn Warner, who made statements about a conspiracy of lizard people taking over the planet before the explosion that damaged 41 buildings and injured 3 people in Nashville, Tennessee on Christmas Day. Law enforcement sources say Warner's writings indicate his interest in a number of conspiracy theories, including the lizard people takeover. He may even have had a pastime of hunting such aliens in a park. Okay. So
right.
you people out there that do that stuff, you better stop it.
Knock it off.
All right, you're on a list.
Yeah. Knock it off. Poor reptilian.
I mean, this is disturbing, right? So he has a belief system that he was trying to save people from these lizard people. And that gets people all up in arms. Like, what's up with these lizard people? Why are people so obsessed with that? But then I came across this woman, this Dr. Sarah McKay. She's an Oxford University neuroscientist, and she has said something that I had never heard before, and I just thought this was interesting. And I know we're going to go into lots of stories about people encountering lizard people and reptilians and how they're controlling the planet and their agenda. We have an amazing interview with Johnny Enoch after this, what I'm going to share with you. But I just want you to take this and see what you think about it. Okay, Sarah McKay. She says, she has a blog and she talks about her research. She says, have you noticed the lizard brain lurking in the pages of self-help books, leadership pep talks, sales and marketing presentations, life coach, Instagram posts, and even Psychology Today? First of all, can I just say, is reptilian stuff in self-help books?
I don't know. Not that I noticed.
I don't
Okay.
know.
All
I've
right.
never read one.
It's a new
Maybe I should.
2020. All the self-help books have reptilians. So she says, these are quotes. Lizards can't be leaders. Stimulate your customer's lizard brain to make a sale. The reptilian brain and how it can stop your child from learning. The reptilian brain has the power to block therapy. These are examples in her work of how people use the idea, the concept of the reptilian brain to say that there's something wrong. There's something stopping them from being human. So she goes into the origins of the idea from a scientific point of view, what the reptilian brain is about, but she calls it a myth. So listen to this. The concept behind the reptilian lizard brain was proposed back in the 1960s by neuroscientist Paul MacLean. MacLean suggested that the human brain is divided into 3 layers that each emerged in succession in the course of evolution. The oldest is the reptilian brain, and it controls basic functions such as breathing, body temperature, heart rate. It is widely used by therapists to explain a fight or flight response, which you've probably heard. This model appeals a lot to psychotherapists because it seems to give biological credence to Freud's theory of personality with ID and ego and superego mapping with the reptilian brain. But she says, with her research, that this is not true, that this is not scientifically true. A recent entertaining titled paper, "Your Brain is Not an Onion with a Tiny Reptile Inside," published in Psychology Science Today, addresses this problem that's been put out there that's false. From the perspective of evolutionary biology, the authors state that the brain idea, this lizard brain idea, in contrast to the clear and anonymous agreement on these issues among these studying nervous system evolution, is wrong. So, firstly, it implies evolution is a linear progression with one organism evolving into the next, lizard, mice, monkeys, humans. At the same time, more complex layers of brain are added on top of pre-existing layers, but she's like, this is not correct. And she goes into the fact that from the perspective of neuroscience, the reptilian brain analogy completely falls apart when we consider our understanding of the neurobiology of emotions and behavior, and this is what runs the brain. Emotions like fear are often said to have been inherited from animal ancestors. Fear and anxiety are not biologically wired. They do not erupt from a brain circuit in a pre-packaged way as a fully formed conscious experience.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. I
know. I went
that.
through all that science jargon and I finally got to the point. So she says, my problem with the reptilian brain analogy is that it implies human behavior is driven by first and foremost only by fear, and that the reptilian brain overpowers the ability to have calm and rational thoughts. There is no hard-wired lizard brain fear circuit, which is what she's saying is we have created that, and then we've come up with this thing. Well, this thing is controlling us, but the idea of it is not true. That humans are not run on fear. That is something we have created to understand why we have fear. Interesting.
Okay.
So this has nothing to do with people that have reptilian experiences, but maybe this idea that we're like the reptilians and that's why they want to take our energy is not really the plausible answer. But that this idea that like this fear is not wired in our head. This is something that we have created to understand our world, so we can uncreate it, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm going to go to an interview with Johnny Enoch. If you don't know who Johnny Enoch is, he is a speaker, he is an author, and he has been on many networks, including ours, Gaia, talking about these subjects. And he has an interesting take on reptilians, but he also talks about how the fact that it's not just reptilians that we need to think about. We need to talk about other things that take our energy and stop us from our human potential. Here's the interview. Thanks, Johnny, for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be with you.
So let's talk about the subject everybody loves talking about, reptilians. Now, we've been hearing about reptilians for years and what they're doing and maybe what their agenda is. But my thought process is maybe their agenda has changed with all things that are happening on our planet, with everything that's been happening with the financial world, the COVID situation, everything's been happening in 2020 and 2021. So I'm wondering, in your research, have you gathered anything about a new agenda possibly from the reptilians?
First of all, I really want to paint this picture for everyone, is that a lot of what happens on Earth is coming from about 3,000 light years away from here. You'd be very surprised over and over again how much, when we go down the rabbit hole, you'll discover a link to other influences that are being passed down to us. And when we talk about reptilians or we talk about extraterrestrials, we can't just say, hey, this is one type or one little group over here. We are getting multiple influences coming in from all sorts of different directions. And when these influences are coming at us, it's like we could put them into two categories. There's one group that wants to speed us up, and there's one that wants to slow us down. And if you want to put this into perspective, just think about the idea of where we would be today if we never had a dark ages. Okay. So we would already be zipping around to other solar systems, and you'd be probably doing this podcast up in some other area out in space. Right. So what I like to tell people is that, just to give you a little perspective, if you go just 10,000 light years from here, you have 20 million solar systems, and it's very, very busy there. And just in our galaxy alone, there are more planets than there are grains of sand on all of our beaches. So when we talk about the reptilians, when we talk about other groups, yes, they are influencing us. And we do see things speeding up, and there are all kinds of changes that are happening around us. But I don't think we have to look too much further than just to look into our own lives and what we're going through right now in our outward perspective of the world to see that, there's a great change happening.
And do you think that great change is being influenced by a reptilian nature? Are they part of the people slowing the progress down, or in your opinion?
Absolutely. And so what you have to look at for this when you talk about reptilians or any of these extraterrestrial groups is that right now, when we look at the algorithm of reality, it's quite complex. Okay. It's being influenced from many different directions, not just reptilian, but extraterrestrials, in a way that we have groups that we've heard of. Let's say that, we've talked about the Greys, right? The Zeta Reticula Greys. Some people say that, the reptilians are their overseers, and whatever we call a Grey, there's so many types of Greys. Mm-hmm. And so some have said, okay, the Greys are coming back from the future to sort of correct a problem that's happened. Okay, so we have this thing called quantum multiplicity, that so many things are happening at the same time to us. And when we're seeing this influence coming from the future with certain agendas, that's coming into the past. We have the past coming and putting things forward, as well as we're influencing our own reality, and we have influences from other dimensions. And so this is sort of like those Japanese sword makers that are putting edge after edge after edge to perfect things. But if you think about what's happening in the world right now, you might say we have certain biogenetic technologies. We have certain shifts that are happening as a collective. We're seeing shifts to our governance, how we travel, what we do, what we're like, how we're interfacing with each other. And there's certain technologies that are being introduced. We are greatly becoming aware of ourselves in ways that we never have before. So you might say that these influences are happening in many, many different ways to us. And it all comes back to our consciousness of who we are. And you might say that our genetics are being tampered with. They always have been. Okay, we go back into the Sumerian stories, and we have this idea that, okay, we had reptilian looking figures back then. Most certainly you've seen those. But at the same point, I just want you to think about this. With your DNA and how it's important into what we're talking about of decoding this reality, one of the illusions that we have right now is something called lineal subjugation. We think that there's this linear perspective that we're moving forward and just moving in a straight line, like time is like a river, right? We can't step in the same place twice. Your consciousness is imbued with a perspective that gives you the illusion of this. But imagine beings that have technology, beings that are so powerful that they can go backwards and forwards in time, that they can edit, change, and rearrange things. They can inject certain things into our timelines and configurations that bring us onto the path that we're where we are. And so that's a perspective to look at with this.
And so that's what the reptilians are doing. They are they are manipulating our DNA. They're going back in time, they're going to the future. But why? I mean, so the agenda has always been that they're trying to control us, and it's been negative. Is it still negative? Is a slightly different motivation this time? I mean, because I feel that a lot more people are evolving on a spiritual level or even DNA wise. But is that not true?
Well, we're being tampered with all the time. Okay, so here's the thing. Our DNA, if you look at your DNA, what does it look like? You got the helixes, right? Okay, let's just go back to Francis Crick and DNA just for a very quick little preview. When we look at our DNA, it sort of looks like two antennas if you see the coils wrapped around it. We see that it's a receiver. So if your consciousness is coming into that like a receiver, because it's a non-local awareness, you see from, let's say, a quantum theoretician perspective that reality is changing and shifting every billions and trillions of times per a Planck second, that it's shifting constantly. We have this reality coming at it from all kinds of perspectives. And if we go down to the chemical basis of this and we shift that, even one of the billions of combinations that we could have, we shift that a little bit or add another stem, we've essentially changed that receiver for this reality and how we're receiving reality.
So they're changing our reality? Is that what's happening?
There is a case that you can look up. It's by Cynthia Hine, and she documented this in a book that she wrote about UFO encounters in Africa. And in the book, she was talking about the Rhodesian War. She said that, and I brought this in my notes here, that there were these Zimbabwe troops that were out there, and they were sort of, stationing themselves and, battling against the locals and whatnot. They end up having this encounter that was a very alarming one, where their groups were taken up and encountered these reptilian beings, and the reptilian beings did something absolutely terrifying to them. So they instilled this incredible fear in them that was absolutely bone chilling, that it felt like they were outside of them and entered inside of them at the same time. They said absolute cold, emotionless, terrifying, frightening. These beings were enormous. And they ended up finding themselves, for what it felt like, that they were completely dissected and put inside of some kind of jars of themselves that they were able to see. And then it felt almost as if they were cloned. And after they went through these processes, they were brought back after that. And they said, this was the most terrifying, awful thing that they'd gone through. But to them, they're still, distraught about it. Why did they experience this, being brought onto the ship and going through all this? Was it some kind of fear that was being put into them to absolutely terrify them to feed off of this? What was taking place in that incident? And again, this was documented in the Flying Saucer Review in the UK, which is a very distinguished publication out there. So with that, we've heard these encounters from the reptilians that are either very, very terrifying, or we've heard them being these areas where they're accompanied by little grays. There's another incident of a European socialite who was visiting out in Los Angeles. And when she was out there, she would get these visitations that would be first accompanied by the grays, who are sort of observers, and the reptilians would go in there. And again, the encounter was more of a sexual nature. And when these things happen from these beings, it's almost as if there's something they're feeding off of with humans. There's something there that is important to them. In the experiences that I've had with people doing the clinical hypnotherapy work I've done, or even the folks I've talked to who have been knowledgeable in this field, they've told me a very strange fact about when encountering the reptilians. There is a fellow that I know that used to work with the Sergeant Major Bob Dean, the late Bob Dean, and who's a very respectable figure in the ufology community. This fellow had a military background, and he told me a very serious fact. He said, for some reason, that the reptilians, they did not like the smell of cigar smoke or whiskey. And at first I thought he was joking because him and Bob Dean used to really enjoy their cigars and whiskey. But he told me that that was an absolute fact, that they knew in the military areas that dealt with these sorts of encounters, that for some reason that the smell of whiskey they did not like it.
Wow. Look
There
at
you
that.
go.
I mean, tequila, they totally dig, but whiskey, nope,
Whiskey.
not
Well,
a reptilian thing.
That's it.
So be careful, people. Bring a bottle of whiskey everywhere you go. All right. So on a serious note, though, so it doesn't sound like the agenda has changed. It sounds like it's sort of the same. But on a lighter note, I have to say, and maybe I'm wrong, I feel like a lot more people are maybe protecting themselves, or they're not. They're maybe evolving a little bit better. Consciousness is growing. What are your thoughts on that? Because the reptilian fear has been something that is not new in this space at all.
Yeah, well, you shouldn't fear any beings out there. First of all, we are an infinite consciousness, and we have an incredible destiny, an incredible future. All of humanity does, and each and every single one of you that's watching or listening to this, you have to know that there is nothing to fear, and that you just have to come from a place or a perspective of love, and moving forward into the future, we'll create it. But we really don't realize how many extraterrestrials are walking amongst us. If you want to see extraterrestrials on any given day, go down to Venice Beach. And I'm not even joking. You might think I'm joking, but I'm not. Go down into Las Vegas. Not only what Charles Hall told us about the tall whites being there, but there are extraterrestrials that have been placed in places of government, that are working over at Oxford. They're working with our scientists. They're helping us with things. They're, amongst us in many different levels. Our governments in certain programs have technologies and experts and ways to see who is telling the truth about who's actually encountered ETs. For example, if you have spent time with extraterrestrials, or you've made it off planet, your atomic structure in your body changes. And we can tell that. The other thing is with this about how many that we're encountering and what's out there. I mean, there are certain ways that extraterrestrials can come to you, and you might see them for a moment and they might disappear, and it might be a very real encounter. Have you ever seen the movie Avatar?
Of course.
Okay. Well, imagine this. Let's talk about something that we'll say is a artificially programmed chimerous energetic structure. So this is sort of where our holograms are going to go in the future very, very quickly. We look at these sort of holographic forms that you could encounter in whatever type of image that could shake your hand and hand you a document and then disappear in front of your eyes. This would be based off of photonic science. A photon moves at something like 300,000 kilometers per second. And so we look at denser subatomic particles on how this could be used. So sometimes this gets mixed up into what we call shape shifting. And so people sometimes say, well, are these reptilians actually, our royal families? Are the royal families shape shifting into them? And as I told you before the show, I don't believe that the royal family are reptilian whatsoever.
You're the only one. I said you're the only one who thinks that.
Well, I will tell you that Her Majesty, for example, is a very advanced soul, but and a very smart lady, by the way, knows how to fix her own Land Rover when it breaks down outside of Balmoral Castle. But she's definitely not a shape-shifting reptilian. However, that's not to say that there aren't certain bloodlines on this family that come from more of an extraterrestrial descent, and that's why they have preserved those traditions, right?
Mm-hmm. So the moral of the story is they're still here. They still seem to view us as food. And although we have more tools, I feel, than we did even 20 years ago to protect ourselves and be stronger than an extraterrestrial force.
We might think from our perspective, why would they want to do something like this? Where's this agenda? But it's the fact that they don't necessarily have the same capacity for empathy. And so when we look at beings like reptilians or one of these groups and we say, okay, why are they the way that they are? We're looking at them from our human perspective, but eventually we're going to realize is that we're a lot closer in our connection to all these beings out there. We're all not that much different, and we're all brothers and sisters.
Interesting. All right. Thank you so much, Johnny, for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so what we've learned in that interview is the one thing that you can do to get rid of your fear is smoke a cigar and drink some whiskey. That apparently takes
Yeah.
care of those reptilians. They do not like that stuff. They are like tequila
I can-
drinking.
I can get on board
I'm
that.
screwed.
I can subscribe to that. I'm happy with that.
All right. All right.
Oh man.
But one thing that was really interesting, he's the only person that I've ever heard say that Queen Elizabeth is not a reptilian. I mean, that's like a thing everyone talks about, right? That she's
Yeah,
some kind of
royalty,
alien
yeah.
species, some other kind of hybrid alien species, but she's not reptilian. I don't know. I think that's interesting.
Do you remember there was that? Was it Princess Diana that supposedly referred to the Queen as like the old lizard or the Queen lizard or something like that at some point? It was
Oh,
like
really?
a little, yeah. It was just a little name that she had for her, apparently, or maybe that was just a rumor. But anyway, interesting piece.
Oh wow. I'll have to
All
look
right.
that up.
Yeah.
Pissa.
Yeah. But Josh, you actually fell into a hole of hybrid stuff.
Yeah, things got dark. Usually, I mean, last podcast I was Love and Light. It was a mystical experience, more Spielberg. This is definitely darkness. This is a horror story. It's gonna read like a horror story, but I recently went on a binge of like multiple documentaries about the phenomenon, and one of them I watched was called Extraordinary: The Seeding. I think in the beginning of this pod I called it Extraordinary: The Seeding. That's not how you pronounce it. Extraordinary: The Seeding, and it's really well done.
Very serious.
With great music. And what is it really about? It's about contactees who've gone through the hybridization program that aliens are supposedly doing to us humans. And I've never really dived into it. I've always resisted this. I know Matt dived into David Jacobs, but I've always kind of didn't want to believe this was real. I kind of want to believe all aliens are good, as we know, but there's something to this, and this was profoundly dark and scary. And it's probably the scariest documentary I've ever watched, just from an information standpoint, and it's really well done. So this is what I learned. Prepare yourself. It's going to get dark. Fun fact before we start. I learned in my research, I was skimming through some books and articles, that a lot of abductees or contactees are double jointed. Isn't that interesting?
What?
I didn't know that. Yeah, there's a
Really?
bunch. Like, I think both people I'm going to talk about are double jointed, or at least one of them is. And there's multiple. I just kept reading
I've
about
never
it. Yeah, it's
heard
really
that.
weird.
Did it
And that
happen in
plays into
March?
the- Nice. No. Yes, all these stories happen in March.
Damn
But
it.
no, if they're double jointed, they're just saying that because they're hybrids. It's not just about being abducted. Some of these people are also claiming that they themselves are hybrids. So, okay, who are the characters in this?
Double jointed
this-
in what way? Like their knees
like
bend
their
the other way?
wrists or their fingers or their elbows, like just whatever. I actually don't have total details, but it was around the wrist and hands mostly. Yeah, and different.
Okay.
It's just a thing. Like, and of course, that leads to like talking about mantis beings and crazy shit. But anyways, the two
Wow.
characters. There's a lot of people in this documentary. Some we've covered before actually, but the two I'm going to focus on tonight are Geraldine Orzigo. I think you pronounce it. I'm just going to call her Geraldine because I can't pronounce her last name. And Robert Fullington. And their stories are shocking. And I'm basically going to break down what happens to them and how this is related to reptilians, because the reptilians apparently are one of the races performing some sort of large-scale hybridization program, which is super dark and super scary. So this is the story of Geraldine. She had, like both her and Robert later in life, had a breakthrough moment where they really remembered an abduction. And then that led to them going back to their life and realizing this has been happening their whole life, which is very common. And then through regression, they recalled more. So some of it's conscious, some of it's through regression. So this is what Geraldine remembers. It starts off horrific right off the bat. She remembers being 5, living in Fremont. She goes to a window. Her dad's distracted in the kitchen. She sees a light. The next thing she remembers, she's inside the ship. She's on top of like a dentist's chair. And then she has a tracking device inserted into her uterus. Cut to 16, a little bit older. She's still a kid. This is where it gets super dark and creepy. Prepare yourself. She remembers being on a ship. Part of this is conscious, part of this is through regression. She's in a large room with all these other kids. And they all seem kind of happy. They're playing, they're throwing a ball, and they're having fun. And this is what she said, not verbatim, but close enough in this documentary. Sober and serious, that there was like a large plastic wall or something, like it was like a see-through barrier, and there was a machine, like a giant arm with all these unconscious children, and it was picking up each child and then injecting them in the anus with some sort of tracking device, and then dropping them in a pile of unconscious children. and
God.
Oh, that's not fun.
she sees
Oh.
that. That's obviously horrific and horrifying. And she remembers further down the ship. It's just like a horror, like a row of, it's like this giant ship. It's just like a hallway of horrors. she comes to this other section where she vividly remembers these grays, tall grays, which I think is important because this story is going to connect to the next one. There's all these similarities between a lot of these. And it will get to reptilians in a second. I think the grays are obviously working for the reptilians, or they're biological robots, and they keep explaining how these things talk to them, and it feels very robotic. So I think they're working for the reptilians. Anyways, she sees in this room these women being taken, the little fetuses being taken out of them, and multiple contactees describe the same instrument, this long pronged instrument with 3 like hooks on it, being inserted into people and taking out a tiny fetus, like a tiny fetus. The fetus is immediately like plugged into something and dropped down a chute. They all describe a chute, like it's the same thing they're describing. It's not like differences, it's all the same shit. And then the fetus goes down the chute, and then the next one they remember is tall grays, like basically doing genetics, and science on these fetuses. And then she just remembers the ship being giant, and she kind of ends this section with just saying like, it's clearly a ship designed for like large scale, what does she call it? Hybridization and something else, and harvesting ship. And that's how she leaves that thing. So that's what she recalls. It's very similar too. She's not the only one who recalls this similar stuff. It's so dark, but like there's a lot of people, and the reason why I'm giving her story any credence is because she just represents the tip of an iceberg of thousands of people who are in therapy who talk about this stuff. A lot of this is based off the work of Barbara Lamb and other people who regress these abductees. And there's thousands, and then you just have to ask yourself how many thousands aren't in therapy, and how many people out there are this happening to. And some number was thrown out in the movie, like 1 in 50 or something crazy. So it's
and
like,
these are reptilians, though.
Well, I'll get to that. So that's just. She's a little bit older. She has another experience where she's inserted with black goo, and it's a horrific experience, and she's inseminated. Now that's one way she would report
Black
getting
goo.
pregnant.
Black
goo, yeah,
right?
black goo. And she got
okay.
inseminated, and I'm not. And then there's another way they would inseminate her, because she apparently had multiple kids. She had multiple kids, and I'm not going to get into this part, but she would like met her kids, these hybrid creatures in the future, and it was a very strange experience. But before I get to that, there was 2 ways she get pregnant. One was this way, but it seemed all gray aliens. But now I'll get to the next part, which is just super bizarre, and there's multiple experiences of this. It's a screen image story. I want to say. So she remembers being at a party, and this guy, like the ideal guy, is standing in front of her. She meets at this party. She remembers this. Like if you had to draw like the hottest guy in her mind that she would want to have sex with, it was him. Which there's a reason for that. I'll get to in a second. And that's all she remembers. She remembers being at this party, meeting this guy. Through regression, she recalls basically this guy looks like he drugged her or made her numb. She said over and over again. I listened to part of the regression, and then all she remembers is that basically they were having sex, and he was right on top of her, and his face was super, super cold looking and would not move at all. And what she came to realize, which is that his face actually would glitch, and then she would start to see like a reptilian face, and she started to realize that the guy was just a screen image. It was just her subconscious projecting whatever was the most attractive thing, and the lizard or the reptilian was using it. And I'm like, okay, come on, this is like, how is that even? Come on, why would they do that? Why don't they just inseminate you if this is a real thing, if any of this is real? But apparently she broke it down, which was kind of interesting. Why? Because she's done a lot of work on this. Why go through all that trouble? Like, why trick you and pretend to be you're a sexual fantasy, but really you're a reptilian? Like, what's the point of that? And apparently she, through regression and just her own work, said it's just a sexual energy. It's like the union, the energetic signature that's like when you're having sex is ingrained into the entity. Because what are they doing? They're creating like a lower, like vibrating entity. They're creating a dark entity, like a reptilian entity with a different brainwave and vibration than we have, darker. And they're creating that. And I guess in the sexual union, there's power there that can be used to help imprint the genetics of the creature. Everything I just said, I have no idea what I was saying, but that's basically the gist of what she was saying. So like, don't
Super
take
dark.
my word. I was a psychology major, but that's as far as it went. Yeah, go on.
Did they ever go into why, like this hybridization thing, like the David Jacobs thing? He's basically saying that it's the beginning of this, soft invasion where they would like infiltrate the human race with people who look human, but they're actually mostly alien or whatever. Is this
or
is
reptilian?
this kind of what they're saying?
I mean, that's
Yeah.
Someone's
a big thing.
someone infers that there's multiple things thrown around. It might not all be dark. I was reading books too. Some people are like, it's all part of like they agreed to be here, and it's about raising the vibration, the genetics slowly over time. And some of it's super dark like that, like they're slowly integrating themselves into our world and doing a slow takeover. Like there's that too. But I don't
Ooh, I
know.
love
I
that
actually
voice.
stayed away from that because it's not clear to me. Like I actually wanted to ask you, Max. I knew you knew David Jacobs, but that's the prevailing theory, I guess. I don't know. All I was fascinated with this was her story, and they're just slowly changing our genetics for some reason and having hybrid children. Some don't stay with us though. It's not like they stay here. They go somewhere else. They're like on a ship. And there's even an encounter where like these women are like in these. This is where it gets really bizarre. These women are being there's an alien on top of a reptilian forcing themselves upon them, and they're in a situation where other aliens and humans are watching. Like multiple people recall this, like multiple abductees. So they're being violated while humans and aliens are watching them. And some of the humans, they'll even say they're like scientists, and they look uncomfortable being there, like almost like they're forced to watch it. So like if you say anything, we'll do that to your family or something like that. It gets super dark and weird, like so weird that I couldn't stop watching it. But it was really well done. I mean I don't want to disrespect these people's stories,
so
but they don't really
uncomfortable.
get into like why too much. They kind of have an explanation a little bit in there, but no, man, it's really.
Does this sound like a government program, though?
Well,
there's that whole separation
yeah.
between some of these, like a lot of these abduction things that could be government program type stuff instead of, the friendly aliens, I guess.
Right. Well, at least a conjunction where there's some sort of deal going on and they have to help them or whatever. Like, I don't know, the whole Eisenhower meeting thing where they said, okay, we'll take tech and you get to abduct people. Like, I don't know. But just really quickly, there's one other guy in here called, whose name I said earlier, Robert Fullington, who's super fascinating, just like Geraldine had a breakthrough experience. He's actually in the military and recalled a lot of stuff that happened to him. But I just wanted to go over this really, really dark and interesting thing that's so weird and so interesting. Was not all programs are the hybridization program. So when you get abducted, there could be multiple reasons. This guy was in a different program, and it was creepy, and it connects to reptilians. So he remembers waking up in an underground facility. It didn't seem like a ship. It seemed like he was underground. And he was on a gurney, and he remembers seeing Nordic-like beings walk past him, but they were glitching, and he noticed they were reptilians, and they just looked at him with malice, like they hated him. But he just was like, whoa, that's so weird, I'm really messed up. He's getting moved in by these beings, the Greys, and he comes to this area where there's these large vats of tall Greys clones, and he knew they were clones because they're kind of giving him bits and pieces telepathically, and these giant Greys with long fingers in these vats. And they kept saying clone.
Wait, was he?
Like, oh my
Sorry,
God.
I don't mean to interrupt, but was he a soldier? He was in the military, or?
No, at this point he was out of the military. He's been out for a while.
Okay.
Yeah,
all
at this
right.
point he's out. He's out. These are
But
these
he got
breakthrough experiences.
abducted. But
He's been abducted many times, and this
Okay.
was one experience he had. And he goes into lots of different things. I just jumped ahead to make it really concise, but this is just so bizarre. He remembers just all of a sudden waking up in a vat, and he looks around, and he's like, "Where am I? I feel so weird." He looks down, and he sees long fingers, and he realizes he's in one of those vats. He's in one of those bodies. And he's like, what is going on? And he sees all the alien beings outside the vat start to like run around and like panic like something's wrong. And then he blacks out and wakes up. And what he was saying, and this is what he said, and multiple people have said this, I have no evidence to back this up. It's just super fascinating that they're using people's consciousness to like power these clones. So these clones or robots or biological whatever, and the way they work is by using someone else's consciousness temporarily to make them to like a slave. So like while Mary Jane or Mary, your aunt, sleeping at night in her bed, her consciousness is being used to like power a clone somewhere doing God knows what. This documentary is shocking, and I super recommend it. Like there's no way to verify, but the people are sober, and there's thousands of people reporting this. So do with that.
And where did you
what
watch it?
want.
Amazon Prime?
I watched it on Amazon. I think you probably can get other places, but it's called Extraordinary, The Seeding. And it's actually really well done. It's really well done documentary. I just recommend it. So a lot of the ones out there are very like C+. Like a lot of you alien docs, you're like, oh, come on, get out of here.
Yeah.
I still watch it, though, because I'm a super fan. Anyways, you're welcome for that darkness. That was just darkness, just pure
You guys, we're not going
Yeah.
to get any better because we're going to move on to Matt. It's just going to keep getting darker. But my God.
Yeah, this is more insane than anything else. Than
All right, let's do it.
dark. Look, this is a long story and there's a whole lot involved, so I'm just going to try and race through it as best I can. But like I said earlier in the show, I really wanted to dig into like the oldest case I could find where someone came across reptilian beings.
Ooh, okay.
And this is like a classic UFO abduction type scenario that happened again and again. So this happened in 1978, in Italy, of all places.
Is that before the David Icke stuff?
I believe so, yeah. I don't know what year Ike started talking about reptilians so much, or like bringing it out into the zeitgeist, if you will. But
Nice
this was
vocabulary.
78, so I think that was before Ike anyway. But yeah, so this happened to a gentleman by the name of Pierre Zanfretta. So if you've ever heard of the Zanfretta incident, this was apparently a big deal back in 78.
Okay.
Wow.
Not for most reasons, because there was a bunch of evidence backing this up of people who witnessed things around this guy as well, and we'll get into it. So, December 6, 1978, 26-year-old watchman, husband and father of two, Pierre Zanfretta, was on a routine patrol in the village of Torriglia in Italy.
Oh yeah, it's regular. No, I've
You
never
been
heard
there,
of it.
Noel?
You been there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
All
I've
right.
stopped grapes there before. Lovely. Yeah.
Lovely. It's a great place.
Yeah, lovely place.
All right.
So, so he's doing this. So he's a night watchman. Basically, he's part of a group of security people who go and basically just check on different properties and make sure there's no shenanigans going on, no thieves or anything like that. So he goes to this property alone. It's this little estate in the village of Torriglia, and he stumbles upon some crazy, crazy shit. So here's what happens. This is the initial incident. Basically, sets off this whole like horrible saga for this guy. He really gets messed up over this. So he was driving to the estate. Routine job. He's done this a million times before. And this is during the winter, so the roads are pretty icy. So he's kind of negotiating through these icy paths. And as he sort of approaches the property, classic thing happens. His car goes dead. He can't steer. He can't do anything. He's just dead. Engines, radios, the lights, everything's down. So he hops out of his car and he's like, "Ah, crap." So he was like, he'll just walk over to the estate and make sure it's everything's fine, and then he'll try and radio back and get some help. So as he looks over to the estate, he sees these 4 lights running around the estate. And he's like, "Oh, man, thieves. Thieves are broken in here. I need to go and sort this shit out." So he grabs his flashlight, and he's got a revolver. And he sneaks on into the property, right? And he's like, "I'm going to get the jump on these mongrels." So he sneaks on in through this place. So just as he's preparing to leap out and confront these trespassers, Zanfretta felt something touch his shoulder from behind. He spins around, revolver in hand, obviously. He's prepared, knows what he's doing. But instead of finding an average human criminal illuminated by his flashlight, he saw an entity that he describes thusly: an enormous, green, ugly, and frightful creature with undulating skin, as though
I love the
he
word
were very
undulating.
fat, or dressed in a grey, loose-fitting tunic. And this thing he's described as no less than 10 feet tall.
Ooh. So he's a
So
big
this thing
guy.
is massive. Is a
He
big
played-
boy.
He played basketball.
Yeah. In later interviews, Zanfretta would go on to describe more things about these creatures. And it's people have pointed out, this is a very reptilian-looking thing. The greenish skin. He said there was like little horns, like pointy little horns on its head,
Oh no.
which pops up a lot in these reptoid things. He had these yellow triangular eyes and these red veins going across its forehead. So pretty distinct looking creature.
Okay.
And describes those cat-like eyes that the
Yeah.
reptilians quite
Yeah.
often have. Yeah. So he also describes this unique, sort of odd mechanical piece that fit over these things' mouth. And he asked them about it in later hypnosis sessions, apparently. And it was to be able to breathe Earth's oxygen-rich atmosphere. So some sort of breathing apparatus.
Okay.
So he sees this thing behind him and in shock, drops his flashlight and was, able to stumble back a little bit, picks it up off the ground and just bolts. He's out of there, as you would. So he's running back to his car, and he would later testify that a brilliant light began to loom up behind him. He looks over his shoulder to see a massive triangular UFO floating above the house, the estate, right? And he said it's huge. It's bigger than the house itself. It's just this massive triangular UFO we've heard about a million times. And he said it sort of ascended with this odd hiss to it as it kind of came up. He then claims that he was blasted by this searing heat wave that just sent him to his knees. It was just like this hot beam that hit him. He finally makes it to his car, tries the radio and it's working again, and he's able to call through to the security company that he works for. So they actually have a record of receiving his call. So this is like some of the evidence that comes through. They said he was speaking in a confused and agitated fashion and babbling some incoherent nonsense about descriptions of bizarre human beings. So already they have what the fuck is going on with this guy? And they keep saying he's a super average guy. He keeps getting these mental evaluations that the company pays for because they think, is this guy just losing it? Because this happens again and again and again to the poor guy after this.
He sees the same creature again.
Yeah, these same creatures keep coming after him. Yeah, and he has these mental evaluations, and they find something traumatic happened to this guy, but mentally he's okay. He's fine. He's not a crazy person. He's not hallucinating.
Wow.
So the company that he's radioing, they hear him say this one line. He said, "No, they aren't men. They aren't men. My God, they are ugly." And then the communication cuts. The radio cuts out, and they can't get hold of him. So obviously they send up a team to go find out what's going on with the poor guy. So a team of two guards sort of go up the hill to where he was at this estate. And because of the icy roads or whatever, it'd take them about an hour to get to where he is. So when they get there, they find Zanfretta, the poor guy, lying prone, face down in the snow. And he's just covering his head and shaking. So when he sees these two guards arrives, he gets up and immediately jumps to his feet and sprints over to them, but not for help. He's these two guards both attested that he's this usually timid, lucid family man. And at this point, he was completely irrational and didn't even appear to recognize him. And he wasn't even, they were saying so he had his revolver in him. He's pointing it at him. Because he was just in shock, freaking out. And they'd
totally.
Put the gun down. So they actually had to tackle him and take the gun off him because he was just a mess at this point. And they also note, but despite being lying in the snow all this time, his clothes were actually hot to the touch and dry. From whatever beam hit him.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
So they obviously called the police to come and investigate the scene, see what happened. All the police found were these massive imprints in the ground. I think there was 3 of them, 9 feet in diameter, and they were this odd horseshoe shape. And they believed that was from the ship, I guess.
Wow.
And they also discovered that at least 52 of the Tariglia citizens in the village had reported that they saw this bright, glaring light coming from this estate up on the hill. So eyewitnesses seeing this UFO apparently coming and going from this place. So obviously the media gets wind of this, and it just blows up. And it just becomes an absolute farce, and Zanfretta is called a liar and a crazy person, and he's just ridiculed. His family just comes under, people are calling him all the time and just making his life hell. But like I said, the company sticks by him. They give him a mental evaluation. They find that he's absolutely fine, but he's suffered from some traumatic event, so he keeps his job. But he can't get this out of his head. He's something is missing and I can't get it out of my head. So he's recommended that he goes to a hypnotizing psychologist, whatever. So he does a hypnosis session to find out what happened. Yeah, hypnotherapist. There you go. Done. So under
Crushed it.
hypnosis, he claims that these terrifying apparitions had transported him to a hot, luminous location where they thoroughly examined and interrogated him. According to Zanfretta, these creatures did not speak Italian, but they used a strange, luminous device to translate what they were saying. During the session, Zanfretta also indicated that these creatures came from the planet Teutonia. I don't know. Never heard of that before.
Yeah, sure. Well, hold on a
which
second.
was located-
They just had a.
yeah.
They just had a from the future. They had a cell phone, and it was like a translating thing. You know.
Yeah,
It was like
they
they
had
would
Google
speak, and
Translate.
they're just like Google Translate.
Yeah,
And then it spits it out in Italian. You know what I mean?
yeah, some luminous device. Yeah. So usually you
Way
hear
ahead of
like
their time.
it's telepathy
Way ahead
or
of their
something.
time.
Yeah. Usually it's like telepathy or something with these things, but apparently this time they had a translator. So Teutonia, which is apparently located in the third galaxy, whatever the fuck that means. Is that interdimensional? I don't know.
know.
And
Thought
that
we were in the
perhaps
third
most
galaxy.
disturbingly, they want to talk with us, and they will soon return to our Earth in larger numbers. That's creepy. So
Okay.
that was incident one, and then this kicks off like a series of events that happens to this poor fella, where he just gets abducted, and he goes missing for a few hours. People go looking for him, and they find him lying on the ground in a screaming heap, and he's just a mess. Can't really remember what happened, and then he has these subsequent hypnosis sessions where he sort of delves into what happens during these events. So the second one after this was 3 nights later after this hypnosis, the first hypnosis session, and he's driving through a long tunnel on his way to another job. And his car is suddenly, instead of going dead, it's completely taken over. So someone like remote controls it. He can't steer, he can't brake, he can't do anything. It's just completely taken over. And his car drives at a tremendous speed through the tunnel and into this dense fog bed waiting on the other side, like this big cloud waiting on the other side of the tunnel,
Okay.
where he is suddenly hit by a white hot light. So the next thing that people remember happening is, he doesn't remember this, but the security company, the radio guy at the security company, remembers Zanfretta calling in again and speaking in what he described as a very controlled, robotic-like voice, stating that the car has stopped. I saw a bright light. Now I am getting out. And so they were like, okay, buddy. They send another car to him to find out, like, what the hell's happening, big guy.
He's like the
So
talk
they send
of the
another
town.
team.
Like he's like
Yeah.
going nuts.
Yeah, this poor guy got like dragged through the coals over this too. So they find the group of guards find him in a field not far from where this place was, in a state of shock. And they said, although it was raining at the time, his clothes were warm and dry as he was lying out in the field. Zanfretta says to them, "They say I must leave with them. What about my children? I don't want to. I don't want to." And so they call the police again. Once the police arrive, they describe his car, even though it's in this cold downpour of like icy rain. The car is like searingly hot, like it's been sitting in an oven. And the interior was the same. It was like baking. So whatever hit him was just like immensely hot. And the police also discovered that the car was surrounded, more evidence that they found, with these huge boot prints that were apparently 20 inches long by 8 inches wide. So big feet stomping around the car.
Yeah, it's a big boy.
Yeah. So they actually wrote up a
Okay,
report.
He's a big boy.
It's a big boy.
Boy.
They have this official report apparently where all this went into. So all this is documented in an official report. So it wasn't like this is just some guy's crazy story. All of this is, like I said, documented. They have eyewitnesses to a bunch of different stuff. They also found his gun, which had been fired 5 times, though he could not remember why he fired it or what he was shooting at, which is odd. So after this, obviously, it blows up again. He faces more ridicule. He goes to another hypnosis session. And during this session, Zanfretta recalled being stripped and then forced by his abductors to wear a strange helmet, which enabled him to understand their language, but caused him tremendous pain. He also remembered one of the aliens taking his gun and firing the bullets into a panel, in quotes, in what he can only assume was an effort to see if his human weapons had an ability to harm them, the capability of harming them. Zanfretta then expressed fear over the fact that he may be required to leave his home and family behind. He said, "I know that you need me, but I don't want to. I like to be alone. I have 2 children. I feel good this way. And after all, you are not human beings. You are horrible." So he's not enjoying this. These aren't like space bros. These are horrible, horrible creatures.
Did he, in
So
his
get to the-
regressions, did he say what they were doing with him when they had him? Did he ever recall any of that, like what actually happened on the ship?
I haven't looked into deeply about what he describes. This is all based on a few different articles that I found. But I did find there is a YouTube video that I'll post, obviously, with everything else. That is of his, I think it's his 3rd or 4th hypnosis session, and it's him because I believe they telecast it on the news because he was like a big crazy celebrity at this point in Italy. They posted they showed this thing on the media and the news, and so I have the video of his hypnosis session where he talks about all this stuff, and it's all translated so you can read it.
Oh wow,
from Italian. It's pretty crazy.
It's all public.
So
that's cool.
Yeah. So the 3rd abduction, he has another one where he's riding a motorbike and he's lifted up into the air by some crazy green light. And there's apparently a guard station. He was going up a hill, and there's some guard station that's about halfway up. And this is the only road up this hill. And they let people through, But he was found up the top of this hill, but this guard station, they had no memory of ever seeing him go up past them at all during this time. But he goes missing at the bottom of the hill and somehow finds himself at the top of this hill, not knowing how he got there. So there was a 4th one after that where he just went missing and they couldn't find him forever. Mm-hmm. And this happens again and again to this poor guy. They just take him and fuck with him for a bit, and then everyone goes looking for him. At this point, I'm wondering, like, man, this company's really good to stick by him because they just go like, this guy's a liability. He just goes missing, and then they've got to go send people off to find him all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Nuts.
Must have been his bros. What's the company? What did he work for? I missed that part. Where did he work?
It was like a security company.
Huh.
He was like a security guard.
Wow, this is
Oh,
crazy.
wow, you wouldn't-
but
You think
but,
you
like,
would trust
why
a security
him?
guard? Wow.
Like, why don't you just find someone else to abduct? Like, why this guy?
I don't know. It all seems to stem from this first encounter that he had on the property. But on the 4th encounter, when he went missing and they sent a car of 4 guards to go find him, they actually went to the spot where he went missing. And these 4 guys actually saw some crazy shit. They saw this odd cloud hovering above them, and it was like this, they obviously said it was a UFO, but it was like cloaked in this cloud, this really odd, floating thing. And this apparently turns up again and again. This odd, like it's a mist or it's a cloud or something like that. And I've heard this in different reports of UFOs before, obviously.
We talked about that.
Yeah. But this cloud fires a beam at the car. Everything goes dead in the car and they can't move anywhere. And then I guess one of the guards like jumps out of the car and starts shooting at the ship, and then it flies away. It zips off into the sky.
That's a big moment for him. Yeah, I made it leap.
Yeah. Yeah, but
Get
apparently they
Reptilians.
were so terrified by this event that one of them just went crazy. He went just completely Captain Rats. And another guy actually killed himself because he just couldn't handle what he saw,
Wow.
which was
Darkness.
insane. So I don't know if there was more to that than, same things that happened to Zanfretta, where he has all this missing time and all these other memories. Maybe something similar happened to them. I don't know. So following this encounter, they obviously find him again after this. He turns up again. And then there's another encounter a week or so later where he's filling up gas at a gas station, and he hears someone calling from him it was late at night, from behind the shadows to the side of this gas station. He described the entity that was speaking to him as a tall humanoid figure with a bald egg-shaped head, who was dressed in a checkered suit that included a chest plate made of steel where the shirt would have been. What's really interesting about
Hot.
this really strange looking dude,
Totally
yeah.
hot.
I love an egg shape, man. I really do.
Summer
But-
2021. Totally.
Yeah. Steel shirt. It's so in right now. What's really interesting about this character is John Keel described this person or this type of entity, creature, whatever you want to call him, down to a T exactly, not having known about this previous story,
Oh, we make a
which is
connection,
really
okay.
odd. Yeah.
Huh.
Where
John
did
Keel.
he
Yeah, but
reference
what-
it? Do you remember the story, John Keel story?
Yeah, it was in reference to these bizarre Men in Black encounters. So post meeting with creatures, people would be encountered by these Men in Black, and this was one of the odd people that turned up on someone's door and sort of asked questions.
That
and-
is so weird.
Yeah.
Weird.
man.
But
I
they're
love the
not.
high
But it's
strangeness.
it's reptilians, or it's not a reptilian. It's a humanoid type of person.
This one they didn't say was reptoid. This one was just this odd egg-shaped guy, which is it's like I don't know what's going on there. But the other guys that'd been taking him the whole time were these reptoid creatures.
Huh.
And he meets them again. He says this egghead. He said he swore that the sound of this outlandish individual's voice physically compelled him to obey the request to drive his vehicle into a small cloud again that was hovering just above the ground. So he does that. He's compelled. He has this kind of a mind control thing going on, and he drives his vehicle into the cloud. Sorry, and he's inside a craft once again. All of a sudden. And is now being moved about, walking along the ship freely with these massive reptoid beings once again. So they seem to be a little less like proby and pokey at this point, and they're just kind of walking him around the craft. And he says within this colossal craft, he claimed to have seen large transparent cylinders filled with weird blue liquid. One of the cylinders was said to have contained a frog-shaped body, humanoid frog-shaped thing, which the aliens explained was an enemy of ours from another planet. In two other cylinders, Zanfretta observed a large bird-like creature. I won't say anything about that. And another humanoid figure that he described looking as a caveman.
Huh.
Right? So pretty crazy stuff.
Interesting.
I love this.
Around
There's
these,
like a species of like frog, like aliens that are battling the reptilians somewhere out there in
Right.
space. I'm rooting for the frogs. Like
Yeah.
the frog people.
Bring
Yeah.
out the frogs.
Come on,
That's so
frog people.
Star Wars, you know.
We could do
Just
this.
That's cool.
There was
Yeah.
like the frog guy in Star Wars. You remember that, the original ones? There was like a frog commander. He had a frog head.
I know what you're talking about.
Oh yeah,
he was a little frog.
Squid guy. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's a trap. That guy. Yeah.
Crap.
Anyway.
Yeah, that guy.
Anyway, so around the same
Look
time,
who's in the jar. Okay, sorry.
these crazy beings attempted to give Zanfretta a transparent sphere with what appeared to be an electrically charged pyramid inside. Interesting shape.
Interesting.
The aliens claim that utilizing the sphere would enable human beings to comprehend who they were and how they live. Zanfretta
and you
tried
pick up
to
chicks.
refuse.
Yeah.
Yeah, chicks dig those spheres, let me tell you. Zanfretta tried to refuse the gift, saying that he'd had enough of all these strange encounters and wished to go back to his normal life. Like, he was just done. Like, please, I'm done with you people. I don't want to be special. This was the weird bit. Nevertheless, the creatures...
Oh, this is the
insisted that
weird part?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, this is pretty strange now. Strap in, guys. So, if you haven't strapped in yet. So,
But wait, hold on.
nevertheless,
Can I
the
just make
creatures...
Matt has a really lighter story than Josh. Like, Josh was
I know.
Josh was like, whoa. And then Matt
Yeah.
is like, here we are, we're on a motorcycle. We're in a jar. Reptilians. Okay, keep going.
Yeah, this one's much more beer and Skittles than I usually get into. But it was fun. So, anyway, these creatures insisted that he take the sphere. Take the goddamn sphere.
Take it, Zanfretta.
And they also said to him he was to give this sphere to a man whose name he had never heard before, a noted American scientist and UFO researcher, Dr. J. Allen Hynek.
Oh, okay.
You know that name?
Yes.
They insisted that he
we know that
received
name.
the sphere. Yeah.
What?
Hynek.
but he'd never heard of this person before. This is some American scientist. Zanfretta, for reasons only clear to him, claims that instead of giving this prize to the now deceased Hynek, he hid the object somewhere in the hills of Genoa.
What a dick.
Lame, buddy.
Dude,
So
it could have stopped.
we need to go on a dig.
It could have stopped there. It could have stopped for you, buddy. But you didn't pay attention. You didn't do the directions. And now they're going to keep coming.
Yeah. Right. He claims all up during this time, and I think it was 4 years or so during this time, he was abducted all up 11 times, which is nuts. And it just drove him insane. His family, everything was... He just blew up in the media. He just had this like cult following of crazy people. Some people loved him. Some people said he was a liar and a lunatic. But there was this one strange abduction that happened later on. He disappears once again, was found hours later, doesn't remember what happened. While hypnotized, he claimed he was contacting the aliens and began to speak. So this is during the hypnosis. His voice became guttural, and he uttered these cryptic phrases like, it was like it wasn't his voice. It was like someone else was speaking through him. And this time he said stuff like, question the negative answer, Tixel, whatever that means, Tixel. You can't work out anything in a case like this. To believe or not to believe doesn't mean anything. Each thing is its own time. Just, gibberish. But it wasn't like, it was like, it seemed like it was an alien trying to speak through him, but wasn't quite getting the whole language.
Right.
This whole
I think he was trying to
language thing
sound too
going on.
smart. He was trying to say like philosophy. He's trying to say like profound things. Just
Yeah.
keep it straight, alien. Just
Right.
give me what are you trying to do?
Put down the
What he
thesaurus,
was really
baby.
trying to say was, tricks are for kids. Socrates.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, right. Get out of here.
Yeah.
Why so profound?
Purple monkey
alien,
dishwasher. Yeah, it was like
High
a game
five.
of telephone. But yeah,
Have you guys
anyway.
ever heard of Star Talk? I think you guys have heard that phrase Star Talk. There's these kids on YouTube apparently like member.
Oh, is that like
languages of
light
other
language?
aliens. Yeah, and the way they speak is like more about you're getting the information, not actually what you're saying, and it's all in the universal language of sacred geometry. And it's a whole thing. I came across it recently. This is a little different though, but it just reminded me of it.
Yeah.
Well,
Anyway, poor old Pierre Zanfretta. Pretty miserable time for him.
Yeah.
I don't see that there was any purpose to it. It was basically just fucking with someone.
Well,
And
it sounded
who
like they
didn't- who didn't
tried
want any
to-
part of it.
they tried to contact Hynek, which is interesting. Why wouldn't
Yeah.
you just fly on the other side of the planet and talk to Hynek?
Right. Yeah,
Like,
that's
what's
a real
with the
weird
torturing
thing too.
of this guy, or it just didn't make any sense. But
Yeah.
They're using
I-
his consciousness to operate a clone being. According to
unless they were feeding off the fact that he was just so scared, right? I mean, because they repeatedly would come back,
Maybe.
and he was so miserable. It was like, I mean, that's supposed to be the
Yeah.
thing. They're always feeding off of our emotions. And I know this is a little bit of stretch because it started this whole thing with, Sarah McKay and her work and saying, look, we don't have a reptilian brain. That's just something that's a complete myth. But we do make decisions based on our emotions. And so maybe this idea that like the reptilians can take us over because we have a reptilian brain. No. They're feeding off of our emotions. They're
Right, it's all fear,
creating
yeah.
the fear in our head, and then from that becomes food.
Yeah.
So maybe that's like the constant torture. I mean, you hear that a lot. Like, there's a lot of people that get abducted, and then they're like, they maybe see an alien, and then it's over. But if it's the reptilians, they somehow keep coming back. Don't you see that like in a pattern in some of these stories? Especially with the woman that you were talking about. Like it's a pattern. Like they keep
Yeah.
feeding off of them because they've created this kind of emotional response, which probably gets
Right.
even more
Well,
so.
Yeah, there's definitely a pattern of them engaging in a sexual encounter and feeding off the fear of it, and that being important to something, and then liking that. That's just so sick. I don't know if I can believe it. I don't want to believe it. Team Cantina.
Well,
Matt, was that the
here's
end of
the,
it?
here's the
Just pretend
thing.
it doesn't
Here's the
exist.
thing. I mean, look, I'm gonna be the positive one here. Hear me out. If like all of this idea of new age stuff where you talk about balance and you talk about being in control of your emotions, well, if you have any motivation to have control of your emotions, this would be one of them. because I'm telling you, like, if all of these things are feeding off of you, because Johnny Enoch said there's lots of things feeding off of us, if we can keep our emotions in check, then we don't become food for something else. So take that tonight.
Just become
I like it.
an emotional robot. Don't show any emotion. Just neutral.
Yeah.
or
Like a gray alien.
start
Dig
drinking
it.
or start drinking whiskey and smoking cigars, because then you'll be totally fine. So those are your two choices.
There you go.
I'm
your
in,
emotions
Johnny
in check.
Enoch. Let's do it.
Or smoke some cigars and drink some whiskey. All right, we'll see you next week. Be safe out there. Get yourself some whiskey.
Goodbye.